Hello there. We've had an interesting morning as a church trying to get online in the midst of a Zoom outage. So if you weren't able to take part in the service this morning and you're watching this because of problems with Zoom today, then I can only apologise for that and hope that what I share can at least bring some kind of consolation to not being able to get into the service that we shared this morning. Now, today is National Sports Sunday, so as a part of that, we heard from Deb Rooke about her chaplaincy at Oxford United Women's Football Club, and she's going to be uploading a video telling us about the work she's doing later on. And we also heard from different people in the congregation who take part in sport and what it means to them. So we heard from Mike Lewis about his golf, and how he finds such joy in getting out and playing golf so often. He's delighted he's able to play golf again this week. And we heard from Alex Raven about tennis and football and how he enjoys getting out, the exercise, the teamwork, the community that sport brings. There's so many different positives that sports and sporting clubs bring to our lives, um, and our communities, and we'd recognise that this morning as we shared together. Deb talked about running as well, and the good things that running brings to her, including an enjoyable experience of creation, getting outdoors, and setting new targets and goals, and perseverance that she finds in that. In the service, we heard from the book of Acts, and we read Acts 17, verses 22 to 31. So if you'd like to read them before I reflect on it, then I suggest that you do that now. Now, the verses that we heard from the book of Acts are often taken as being a template for good evangelism practice in the here and now. See, Paul stands in a foreign place. He's surrounded by things that he finds uncomfortable and that he disagrees with. And there he shares the good news of God's love for his creation and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, in the build up to this moment, in the preceding verses, we learn how Paul is distressed by the temples that he sees around him in Athens. He couldn't stand the idolatry. He argued there with the leaders in the synagogue. He got into debates with philosophers. And in the end, he ends up being brought to the Areopagus to state his case for his newfound faith in Jesus Christ. Now, at this point, he could have started by stating the negatives, the idolatry that he found offensive and saw as being outlawed by God. He could have spoken words of judgment and threat, calling out for repentance and demanding change. However, what Paul does here is take hold of something that he's seen as being positive. He seeks common ground and common understanding as the point from which he's going to share the good news as revealed in Jesus Christ. So he gives praise for the religious commitment in the city, and he comments on the altar to the unknown God, giving credit to the people of Athens for recognizing that they don't understand everything, commending them for realizing that they could well be missing something, and taking it as a hopeful sign that could mean that the people in Athens were open to hearing new things and open to learning more about the nature of God. As one commentator puts it, Paul steps into their own confession of ignorance and offers to make known to them what has been unknown. Yet Paul doesn't start with Christ and the resurrection. He starts where the listeners will be more familiar. So he focuses on God's work in creation. And it's from this angle that he's able to point to the common origin that the people of Athens share with the people of Israel. It's from here that he's able to make claims about the nature of God that makes their idolatry meaningless, as he points out that God cannot be created by human hands, but is a living being who actually created the entire world within himself. It is only then, after laying the groundwork, that Paul is able to make any claim about Christ and about how his resurrection confirms the things that he said and did. Now, our reading stopped at this point, but the response to Paul's preaching was mixed. Some wanted to stop him from speaking. They were angry and unimpressed, but some wanted to hear more. And here began the church in Athens, because Paul had managed to find a way to gain the attention of some of his listeners. Now, at this time, it's hard to conceive of evangelism in the way of Paul, traveling about and speaking to crowds in this time of lockdown. It's also not a thing that many of us would normally do. But of course, the internet at this time means that we don't have to leave home to share the good news anymore. Videos are beamed across the world. Good news is shared without walls. But at this time, it's also hard to conceive of taking part in the world of sport. So much sport has been cancelled, and where it starts to go ahead, it seems incomplete without spectators and the kind of atmosphere that we're all used to. However, even in this time, we can see how there are things that we can learn from Paul as we approach the world of sport. We could, of course, start on the offensive and bring judgment, seeking to pull down the more idolatrous elements of sport. We could complain about obscene wages, focus on corruption in governing bodies such as FIFA, or talk of how there's such a discrepancy in pay and support for female sports people when compared to men. Or we could protest against the reality that to be a professional sports person, just as in other areas of life, success is more likely to come if you come from a wealthy background and attend prestigious private schools. Even on a local level, sports clubs can be a challenging place to be. The dressing room is often full of the kind of locker room, kind of sexist talk that you'd hope modern man would have left behind. It can be a very racist place too, especially when you've got teams of different ethnic backgrounds coming up against each other. And many sports have a heavy drinking culture attached to them. So it's not necessarily an easy place to go and share your faith. But like Paul, even though we can be uncomfortable with what surrounds us, it can be entirely possible to find common ground. And in sport, just as in Athens, that common ground will often be in the wonder of creation, in a realization of shared humanity. It could be through the sublime kind of moments that can only happen in a sports setting. It can be through any of the positives that we've spoken about already. The community, the camaraderie, the teamwork, the shared goals, the positive effects on fitness and the community. But it can also come amidst the unknown and the mysterious things of life. Now, I speak as a cricketer here, a sport itself that's quite mysterious to many, but you do spend a long time waiting around with your teammates to bat, for it to stop raining, during the tea interval. Now, if you play sport week in, week out with the same people, you will share life with them. The joys, weddings, birthdays, job promotions, as well as any success on the pitch. but you'll also share the downs: illness, injury, bereavement, crushing defeats and embarrassing failure, often my own embarrassing failure on the pitch. And of course, the same can be true there through any group or club that we are a part of. And as we journey with others through these times, we get opportunities to share our faith, at the very least by our presence. And we can share through our actions as well as our words. Now, it doesn't mean that you let everything that is bad in sport go by unchallenged. All of the problems listed above need addressing. They are issues of justice and integrity. I've personally called out racism many a time. I even got a nickname for it at Haywood Cricket Club that I can't really repeat here. But you can also celebrate what is good. In Haywood, the club there was a big advocate for women's cricket. It made the news for playing Kate Cross, a homegrown England international, in their senior team. There are many good things that come alongside the negatives. Any sharing of faith and addressing of the challenges comes from a position of common ground, shared experience, and shared relationships, such really that you earn the right to be heard. As with Paul, the reaction, though, is likely to be mixed. And I'm not sure if that's a reassuring or daunting thing. It's reassuring in a sense because even Paul, the great evangelist to the Gentiles, wasn't successful all of the time. But it's daunting for exactly the same reason, because if even Paul wasn't successful, then what hope do we have? Well, I suppose the good news is our hope isn't based on our capability. It's based in the hope that we share in Jesus Christ, the one who was resurrected from the dead, whose presence is with us in all areas of life, the one who brings new life and redemption in and through the world of sport, just as he does everywhere else. Now, I've reflected on this from the perspective of a sports person, but in our second video today, we're going to hear from Deb, who's been interacting with sport in a slightly different capacity this year, not as a player, but as a chaplain to Oxford United Women's Football Club.